Welcome back to this week's episode of the Awakening Bodies podcast. Imagine this. You're walking out of the house, and as you're walking out, you have to flick the light on and off multiple times just to get a sense of peace of mind. Or you book a flight months in advance, only to feel your hands start to get clammy and your stomach start to cramp up. This is the experience of Courtney Hayes. At 8 years of age, she was diagnosed with anxiety. From there, day in and day out, she took medication trying to get better. However, to no avail. At 21, she said enough is enough. She broke free. She said, I need to try something new. In her process, she found one particular insight that served as a catalyst for her transformed health. She heard, she's not anxious. She's just experiencing anxiety. And this one insight really started her journey to explore what holistic health was all about. She started to understand that her environment made a massive difference. And now, at 27 years young, she's realizing that the impact that she has had is all because of the practices she's taken on. And on today's conversation, she shares with you how our environment, the habits, our health are all intertwined. And we have the ability to transform whatever we're going through with the right tools and the right practices. Well, welcome, Courtney. So glad to be with you on this conversation today with the Awakening Bodies podcast and everything that you're doing. So excited to share with our community what you're up to, and I know you have a really cool launch coming up. Thank you for taking time out of the day today and being with us.
Thanks for having me today.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is so special.
I'm so excited.
It's kind of weird because we're such close friends. But
I know.
Now it's like, how do we play this dynamic? Let's just drop this. Forget all this. I'm saying this to myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so those who are tuning in who don't know Courtney's actually a really close friend of ours. We've been friends for how long now? 2019 maybe?
18 or 19, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing just to see how our friendship has grown because you originally reached out because I don't even really know how exactly we got connected, but I know it was through IIN. It was through the holistic nutrition program that we both went through.
Yeah.
And then from there, I moved down to Florida. You were living in St. Pete, and now we're at your apartment.
I know. Small world.
Yeah.
Small freaking world.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to see like your growth along your journey, and also to see like how many lives you're impacting within anxiety and just holistic health, and even to see your social media handles like blow up the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy for you.
Thank you so much. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even from, I know you guys have a deeper connection, longer connection.
Yeah.
But to see you, because like I never really knew you until you moved down here. I knew of you. I've seen you a couple of times when you came down to visit, but to actually get close to you and connected with you, it's been really cool to witness.
Yeah.
And it's also been really cool that the relationship that we have has a different dynamic because of the work that I've also done with James. So it's like we've got this deep, intimate relationship that has just like what's what I'm looking for, like connection to another, has just gotten deeper to you.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for you because you're consistently showing up in such a big way.
Grateful for you.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Both of
doing
you.
incredible work for yourself.
Thank you.
Which I'm really excited to speak on because I know that Lauren talks a lot about relationship with food and diet and all of those, and I've seen her go through a journey where it's been a growing relationship, and it's been one where it's challenged me as well because as I'm seeing what she's going through and she's sharing with me what she's going through, it's only a reflection for me to realize like, I'm also dealing with some of this. There's also some of this in my life. So for you, you're committed right now with what you're doing, specifically helping women out with their anxiety, and you've beaten this, and you're working through it. It's not like it's done. I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But you've really transformed this experience of anxiety for yourself. So if you would be open to, could you share with us your journey that's gotten you to this space of openness, specifically talking about anxiety?
Yeah. So this journey started 20 years ago. I'm going to be 28 in a few days. So 20 years ago, I had my first panic attack. And at the time, being a kid, being 8 years old, you don't really know much about mental health. You just go, like in my brain, how I remember it is I was this, maybe more on the slightly anxious side growing up, but like nothing crazy. I remember going from this happy, carefree type of just like typical kid to having panic attacks every single day and just not knowing what was happening to me, why it was happening, and just that instant shift. And I remember it like it was yesterday still, the very first time I had one. And it's terrifying. Like whether you're 8 years old, whether you're 88 years old, panic attacks can be really overwhelming, really scary. And, you know, now being an adult, I feel for my parents having a child who was going through that, because I think we were all so confused. And the doctors, I remember telling me, like, you just have an imbalance in your brain. Let's give you the medication. And so basically for 15 years straight, it was anxiety, being diagnosed with different things. So anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic attacks. And that was kind of the label that I had on myself, mixed with these heavy doses of medication that kept getting altered and increased for 15 years straight.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it started from that young.
Yeah, 8.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like, if you like, can you remember like what was happening? Like what triggered the
Yeah.
anxiety?
So it's crazy that my brain remembers this. It was February, I think 24th, 2004. And I got a stomach bug, threw up a few times, like most kids do at that age.
Yeah.
And I was fine. A month later in March, it's crazy how my brain remembers it, but my sister had a Halloween party at preschool, or not Halloween. She had some dress up party at preschool. She comes home and my mom tells me that she came home early because she threw up. And that triggered, I still to this day don't know why that triggered such a fear in my brain.
Oh.
But hearing that my sister was sick and was throwing up, like even though I just threw up a few weeks prior to that and I was fine, hearing that somebody else did, instant panic attack. And from there, it created this obsession with not only someone else that I care about getting sick, but anyone getting sick, or more specifically myself getting sick. So it was constant anxiety of, am I going to throw up? Is somebody else going to throw up? What happens if I do? And then this obsessive compulsive disorder, the OCD, of I have to do everything in my power to prevent this from happening. So OCD commonly is like, oh, I'm so OCD, neat, tidy, organized, but really it's these obsessive thoughts that you have about XYZ. So for my case, throwing up. And then these compulsions that you have to do in order for those thoughts to go away. So for example, I had to switch on the light 4 times before I left a room. And then in my brain, okay, no one's gonna get sick, everybody's safe, now I can leave the room. Until the next thought came in. And this is starting at age 8, 9 years old. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy how like you remember that, and
So vividly.
it's wild. Like when I was growing up, I never really understood it, but my neighbor also dealt with it, and just by default, because she was dealing with it and because I looked up to her, I started also taking on those traits of like I need to tap this or like hit this or I can't touch a line.
Yeah.
But it was for me, it was just like a learned behavior. So I could only imagine for someone who's like literally like going through it, where they don't really necessarily have control over it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So like, how did your parents support you through that?
I remember, so my mom, still to this day, one of her closest friend, and also my aunt, they're both psychologists. So I don't know what the conversation looked like, but I know they gave her some advice. And I remember the first time my family really approaching me about this, I remember sitting on a beanbag chair in my basement and my mom telling me, I just talked to Robin, I just talked to her Aunt Janet, they told me to give you a kiss, and she gave me a Hershey kiss, and just like a little like chocolate, and just like basically telling me like it's gonna be okay, we're gonna work through this. And I just remember feeling that support. And you know, the second your kid has anxiety or a panic attack, her first instinct wasn't let's get her on medication. It was kind of like let's ride this out a little bit, this could just be who knows what. But it was probably about 6 months later, maybe even a little bit more, that they finally took me to a psychiatrist. And that's where all the terms and the labels came, and she has this and she has that, and it's let's put her on this. And looking back, and we can get into it later in the episode, but looking back, it's just such a different viewpoint on it, because instead of what's her diet like, what's her lifestyle like, it's like, nope, she's got this, let's put this label on it, let's give her this medication, you're good to go. And obviously that didn't fix anything for 14 or 15 years straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you weren't even 9 when they were.
I was not even 9 years old.
When they were giving you now the diagnoses and labeling
And so
medication.
imagine being that young, you're still figuring out who you are in the world.
Yeah, I'm
who
still
you are
figuring
as
out in the world.
exactly. Yeah, 28 years old, I still don't know. But you know, we have this really, really just important season and just in our growth of figuring out who we are and what we are and all these different things in life. And yeah, to be told, well, you have this. So my whole life, I'm a really anxious person. I have really bad anxiety. I have OCD. I get panic attacks. And like that became my identity for so many years, which just, yeah, go ahead.
So when did it become the point where you realized you took on this identity?
Not until I had reached a breaking point when I was 21 or 22, because I had been on just about every single antidepressant that there was. Just about every single dosing. They would prescribe me Xanax and like heavy duty antidepressants and I forget the technical name, but just like things to relax my body, and nothing was working. It would give me temporary relief, but it's like every couple weeks or every 6 to 8 weeks I was going to the doctor. She was checking in, how are we feeling, rate on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, let's up your dose to this. Let's add on this. And I just reached a point, I was on 200 milligrams of Zoloft at the time, so I was in college. 200 is the max dose. I remember just explaining to her, I'm struggling. I'm really anxious. The panic attacks are really bad again. Like, what else can we do? And I remember the look of defeat on her face that day, where she was like, she just paused for a second, and we kind of went through the list of like, well, you've tried this, you've tried that, you've tried this dose. So she goes, 200 is technically the max dose. You've been on this long enough. I'm going to push you up to 225. You can start today. And that was my point where I was like, no. And I walked out of that office and I never went back.
Wow.
And I called my mom and I said, I'm done with the medication and I'm done with this way. And we're finding plan B because it's been 15 years and this isn't doing it for me.
Ooh, I got the chills.
Yeah.
What gave you that level of courage to walk out? Because, I mean, here you are, 21 years old, you've been following this route, and you're like, going up any higher? No way. You're going against the doctors, you're going against your parents, you're going against society. What gave you that courage to step outside of that?
I was so angry. I was so pissed off and just frustrated. I'm like, I'm graduating college next year. I'm in the same doctors that I've been seeing since I was 9 years old. Like, if this isn't working for me, something else has to. So going back to your original question, of the first time I realized that was kind of my identity is in the process of weaning off the medication. Once I made that choice, I went to my first functional medicine practitioner just to kind of get an idea of like, how do I wean off this? Because I didn't want to fully do it by myself. Like I had to, obviously, if I wasn't going to choose the antidepressant route, there wasn't like, I couldn't just not do that and continue my current lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that's where I went down everything holistic health and healing and everything I preach about and teach now and live by it. But in that doctor's office, I remember he was like, all right, what brings you in? And I was like, I have really bad anxiety. I'm a really anxious person. And he stops me and looks at me and goes, no, you're not. And I got so angry and so defensive. I was like immediately turned off from this guy. Like he's invalidating me. How dare he? He doesn't know me. He doesn't know my story. And I'm sure he could like see the anger in me because he was like, wait a second. You telling yourself that right there is a part of the problem. And it just like, wow. So now anytime I'm working with clients, like one of the things I teach in my course is you're breaking free from the identity, because the more that you're telling yourself something, you're identifying with it for as much as you are. And we do this so much subconsciously.
Sure.
So I'm a really anxious person year after year after year. That of course you're going to be an anxious person because you believe that you are. So yeah, it was huge. That whole 6-month journey was massive. Just a lot of awakenings, yeah.
You're going from like the typical conversation of this, which you are, I am someone with anxiety, to now somebody telling you not. Understandably why the initial like jarring, how dare you comes up from, and I got so many questions that I think we can kind of skip forward. I wanna ask you really quick.
Yeah.
Your relationship with your sister, has it always been, what is that like? And was it different when you were a young girl?
Interesting. So we are super close now. Growing up, it was a really strong love-hate relationship. Like loved her because she's my sister, but also just like fought like crazy. And I think I always carried a little bit of a curiosity around, does she feel guilty for any of this? Because obviously it wasn't her fault. Like, she's 4 years old, 5 years old, and she threw up one day like kids do.
Yeah.
I never felt resentful of her. I almost felt more so like protective of, I hope she's not internalizing any of this. And honestly, it's probably a deeper conversation to have. Maddie, if you're listening to this. But yeah, I don't think it played a role. I've had the curiosity of like, if she didn't get sick that one day, would I have this anxiety? Would I have this fear? Like, why did that moment specifically? And that's still a question mark in my brain. I have no idea. I don't know if I will find the answer. I may not. But if she wasn't sick, I could have went to school the next day and somebody else got sick, and it could have been the same thing. So,
well, isn't it interesting how just like anything in life, like God, whether it's positive or negative, like God makes all things good.
Yeah.
And so it's like maybe this is like the divine plan
Yeah.
all along, because look at what you're now doing in your career path. Like, look at all the people that you've helped.
Yeah.
So it's almost interesting, the fact that it happened the way in which it did.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for it. Like, I probably wouldn't know you guys now. It's like every single thing that we do in life takes us somewhere else. If I didn't go through all that, I probably wouldn't have moved to Florida. And it's just like that whole, I wouldn't have gone to IIN and met you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because, and I asked the question and I was like, I gotta ask, because for everybody listening, we talk a lot about this, and you were also pointing on an identity. Something happens, that seed gets planted, you fast forward, and that seed that got planted when we were little kids is still playing out. You've obviously have done a lot of work on it, and so there's still a mystery, and maybe to what you're pointing to, God playing in mysterious ways, maybe we don't have to know the answer. That's also something that is important, because if you're doing the work and you've looked and you can't see what's there, then you don't have to look. You don't have to know. There could be a sense where it's like, okay, this happened, and now that this happened, I experienced this, but now can I let go of that? And now can I trust in, let's say, God, because that's where we come from. Can I trust that God is really playing everything out and it's all good, and can I now move forward? So for everybody listening, this is really important to be mindful for, because if you're dealing with something, maybe there's a seed that got planted that maybe you haven't looked at yet. And maybe this is an opportunity where you can start to ask some questions. As you're hearing Courtney share, which, by the way, thank you for your openness on this.
Yeah.
It's very clear you've done a lot of work to get to this point of vulnerability, because you're sharing with hundreds of people listening.
Yeah.
Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
And there is nothing but comfort talking about it.
Yeah, it took me time to get there. I mean, growing up, it was almost like I was living a double life in a sense. I'd go to school, and it was hard, especially having OCD in school. Because with the OCD comes the habits, and a lot of times those habits, it's like they're so strong that I would do anything I could to try to shut it down, but then the mental noise just got louder and louder. So when you're doing these physical habits around people, or I'm going in and out of a classroom 4 times because I forgot something, but really my brain is like trying to, it was a hard thing to try to play it cool, but I would as much as possible. And I wouldn't talk about this openly at all. Like, even, I have to take my medicine, I have a headache. Like, it was only very close people in my life knew what was going on. And I didn't start sharing it until I got off the medication, and I went down this holistic healing route, and I started my Instagram account in 2018, and that's where the first time I openly shared it was on Instagram.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was at the very least 5 years ago, 2018, 2023.
Yeah, that was about 5.5 years ago. And I remember the fear I felt of sharing this, of like, there's people that follow me, family members or friends that I have that I grew up with in high school that I've been friends with for years, or they've been in my life for X amount of years. And I'm sharing this really vulnerable part of myself that these people don't even know, and they're going to read about it for the very first time online.
Yeah, true that.
But the second I posted my first story, or my first post on there sharing the story, the amount of feedback I got, the people relating, the people understanding, the people saying, I've never heard anyone speak about this, I deal with this too, people in different countries commenting, like, it just, I reached such a specific audience. So all those years that I thought I was the only one going through this, I thought it was only me. Something just shifted where I was like, this whole time, my whole life, thinking I was the only one. There's so many people struggling too, and that gave me that passion too. Like, I have to speak up about this more, because 9-year-old me who thought there was something wrong with her and I was the only person in the world going through this, it's like, the amount of messages, oh my gosh, this started for me when I was 9. I'm like, we could have been friends. Like, yeah.
What a level of contribution to step into that. To put the fear and really acknowledge you for taking that on, because I mean, look, 2023, like mental health is now a big topic.
Yeah.
Even 2018, it wasn't the case.
No.
Like it was just like just coming out, but like I mean,
Yeah.
you go back 10 years, definitely not the case.
No.
Let alone as a 9-year-old or
Yeah.
maybe teenager going through high school. Like, whew, well, yeah, wow.
So to go back to when you went to the naturopath, is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yeah.
So like, what happened then? Like, what did he recommend after he told you that's not who you are?
Yeah.
Then what happened?
So from there, we kind of came up with a game plan of weaning myself off very slowly. I think we were doing 2.5 milligrams every like 2 weeks. So it took me about 9 months to come off. I was really scared of side effects. I was nervous to come off of it in general. I had an idea of what my game plan was moving forward because I learned about the gut-brain connection probably 6 months prior to that. So it's like it wasn't all new concepts where I was going into this blindly. I had an idea of, okay, diet is definitely playing a role, so we're going to make changes here. Let's get an idea of like what's really going on possibly internally. So I had kind of some different avenues. And around that same time is where I started really just doing my own research and figuring out like, okay, how can I start to make myself feel better? And I mean, leading up to this point, my lifestyle was terrible. Like I was heavy drinking, probably 3-4 days a week for 8 years straight at this point, or
Which I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that.
I was messy. I was smoking every single day for like 7 years straight, like
Yeah.
and just relying on getting high and getting drunk because that's the part where I felt the most free and fun and kind of got away from the anxiety, even though the next day, as soon as I was sober again, and I never thought of it as an issue, but now going back, being, 2.5 years sober, it's like, oh my gosh, was I numbing? And but lifestyle played such a huge role, the things I was putting into my body, and that's why I get so passionate about the ingredients, and just, because once I started making little shifts in what I was eating, I realized that all those symptoms I was feeling, and even I'll say anxiety being a symptom, and the panic attacks as a symptom of a result of what was going on internally. I was like,
You were just expressing outwardly.
Yeah.
So what was those dietary changes that you did make?
The very first one I made was coming from a dad who has celiac disease, and so we have had a gluten-free household since I was in 6th grade. So I was like, why don't I just experiment with that, because you never know. So I cut out gluten, and I just felt the inflammation like dripping off of my body. Like I just noticed such an immediate shift, and the panic attacks lessened. So
Just from
gluten, and then I think I did gluten and dairy kind of around the same time, but I tried with both, and that was kind of my way of just, for me, I had a lot of processed foods. So in a way, it was cutting out a lot of the processed foods, because yes, there's high quality dairy and sourdough and things like that, but
for the most part.
yeah, but I was eating so many processed foods. So I think by just in that, it kind of shifted me into having more whole foods and finding healthier alternatives and swaps and things like that.
That's a big shift to do both at once,
Yeah.
especially from going from like such a high processed food to then like, what do I eat now?
Yeah, but I think at this time too, so one of my parents' good friends at the time, she was very into holistic health and healing, and she had healed so much of her own through...
About her book, right?
Yeah. And she had done so much of her own, and we visited her house in LA back in around this time, like 2017, 2018. And she was the one who taught me about the gut-brain connection for the first time. She was witnessing me having panic attacks at her house. It was my first time meeting her. And I was embarrassed, but she understood it. And that's where she told me about IAN. She kind of introduced the concept of holistic health and healing to me and my family.
Wow.
And so I think also seeing living proof of, well, this is someone who had the panic attacks as well. And she's healed, so, and look at how she lives her life, and look at the food she eats. And I remember that whole week we were there, she was cooking us the best meals. Everything was gluten-free and dairy-free and really just good nutrient-dense foods. And I was feeling, obviously I was still struggling, but I was noticing like, wait, this food feels really good. I don't feel sluggish and tired and all these different things. So things started to slowly start shifting in my brain. And over time, the more that I was changing and implementing, the better I started feeling. And I think the more the anxiety just started kind of fading off. And so it became not an obsession, but just extreme passion.
Well, I mean,
This
how
is
could
so
it
cool.
not? Yeah, how could it
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
You were so limited before, and now you have a whole new world available
Yeah.
to explore.
Yeah.
Was she the first person that you ever met who had similar or came from a background of what you were going through and was no longer?
I think so. Yeah.
What was that experience
my
like for you,
knowledge.
like being in her presence? Because again, she's noticing what you're
Yeah.
going through,
Yeah.
but you're seeing that okay, she had it, now she doesn't. Like, what that opened up for you?
So validating. I was like, I want what she's having. I want what she's doing. Like anything, when she recommended IAN, I was like, soul, I'm doing it. Like everything she recommended, I just held at such a high
Standard.
Yes, such a high standard. 'Cause I'm like, this must work. Like I haven't physically talked to other people who are having panic attacks who now don't and live this way. You know, it's just,
It's more of role models.
yeah,
That's so good.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's so true because, like, I mean, I get that medication works great for some people and doesn't for others, but for majority of it, people typically just swap different medications.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they're on that cycle and
Yeah.
they go into it thinking like this won't be forever. At least some people do.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it kind of becomes that
Yeah.
that constant chase.
Yeah.
So that's so beautiful that she came into your life at such a perfect time for you to show you the different way.
Yeah.
So through IIN, what was your journey like with that?
It was so fun. It was so much fun because basically what happened is I decided to come off the medication. I graduated college while going through a breakup, while deciding I was going to move across down the country to Florida from Pennsylvania and enroll in IAN without having a job or any idea of what any of that was going to look like all at the same time.
Oh my God.
So it was kind of like I'm giving my life an entire just remodel everything. And in going through IIN, I mean, it was my first time living alone. It was my first time living more than 2 hours from my parents. It was my first time off of medication. And it was like, so I had that passion, that excitement. I was officially off all the medication. I was definitely feeling drastically better. I wouldn't say 100%, but
Were you still experiencing anxiety attacks?
not anxiety attacks. I moved to Florida and got myself in a really unhealthy relationship. By day 2, I was there. So I was like, yeah, it was kind of like, all right, you've done this. Now we've got more lessons to learn because other things can contribute to anxiety. So I got the nutrition down. But then, hey, let's get your environment. And I moved down to Florida. Nutrition was great. I was drinking Thursdays, Fridays, probably Saturdays. I was in this really toxic relationship. So it was like anxiety started manifesting in ways I hadn't seen before. So it was interesting. It was actually I'm so grateful for it because anxiety started manifesting in, different ways I'd never seen. And so I used my platform to kind of be the voice of, hey, I've healed a lot of anxiety, but I still go through it, so let's heal together.
Yes.
And so it was instead of this person who healed this anxiety, was like, yeah, I've done some of it, but like, hey, I'm anxious today, here's what I'm doing. And it was more of like a relatable content of my journey with anxiety because I didn't consider myself fully healed yet. So yeah, it was definitely a lot of just new avenues to learn and explore.
Which goes to show the way in which you've grown in your social media and your business because it's relatable.
Yeah.
This isn't somebody that's like on the other chasm, and this is where I think a lot of people, they get it confused. It's like we're looking to fix a problem, but people may not be at the solution position yet. They're still catching up into why is this happening, what can I do differently about it. Like they're not here. So for you to meet people where they're at, give them that space to, okay, this person has been dealing with something similar. She's still dealing with something similar, but she's farther along the process than I am.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Can I just go back a little bit? Did you have any symptoms when you were getting off your medication?
Like withdrawal?
Yeah.
Not that I can remember, honestly.
Oh, that's
which
great.
and that's why I moved so slowly because I heard about the brain zaps and I don't know specific ones, but I remember I was so cautious, and especially someone who kind of has a background of the health anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm like, the last thing I want to do is give myself more anxiety coming off the anxiety medication. So
Literally
let's
that.
move at turtle speed. So we did. I moved insanely slow, and I probably could have, it probably didn't have to take me 9 months, but I was being really cautious,
No, that's
and I
great.
was nervous, yeah.
It's beautiful. I mean, I
Yeah.
know personally someone who did stop like cold turkey, and it had a drastic impact on them.
Yeah, and that was the other thing too. Like, I wasn't on this for a year or two. It was 14 or 15 years worth of
Yeah.
heavy medications. So my body almost, and I'd never experienced being an adult or even being a teenager without having something helping me or altering something in my brain. So it was like, that was the first time I was really in my own body and my own mind for the first time in my adult life, which is crazy to think about.
You know, some people. I'm sorry.
Chills.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's incredible because you're 28 years young, so like super young, and some people may look at you and be like, "Oh, she's so young. How could she help me?" But we forget as humans that time does not mean wisdom. Experience does, and you've been through experiences that some people may never go through, or will take much longer for them to go through, and you've
Yeah.
encapsulated in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
It really
Thank
is.
you.
And so, when was the day you decided like that you were going to become sober?
I
I think
was
I actually might know this story, but I could be wrong.
I was working with another functional practitioner, and this was back in 20. Actually, yeah, you do know the story.
I think I do. As I was saying it, I was like, oh gosh.
It's because of you guys.
Oh, that night.
Not in the best way.
Basically, I was visiting these two. I was living in Tampa at the time. We all came together for a little gathering.
That's when I first met you.
Was it the first time
I'm
we
pretty
met?
sure, like, spent an actual period of time together. I'm pretty sure.
So crazy.
Yeah. Wait,
And-
hold on. The first time I met you, I just went to your house for like the first time and stayed over
Hi,
for
I'm
like
Lauren. I'm gonna sleep on your couch, or I'm gonna sleep in your kitchen.
your kitchen on an air mattress with your crazy cat.
Wow.
But you were hosting like a mini retreat,
yeah.
and then I hosted like a mini retreat at my place.
Yeah. So on your mini retreat, I got way too drunk, and
I think everyone got way too.
we
drunk.
all
Everybody
did.
got way
It
too
was
Besides
Yeah.
me, I remember I only had a few. I was like,
It
I'm
was-
waking up sober tomorrow, and by the end of the night, I was like, wow.
So those nights that you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm never drinking again, and then you just do it again the next weekend. I never did again. I literally never did again. And that was the last time I've had liquor. That was March 2021. And I was like, we're just going to do wine. We're not going to get drunk again. We're just going to do wine. So I was turned off by liquor entirely because I'm like, I never want to feel this way ever again. Like, I was at 4 a.m. I was pacing around your complex having panic attacks. I'm like, I've worked too hard. I've worked too hard and come way too far to be having panic attacks at 4 in the morning in this strange complex that I've never seen before. Like your neighbors, I was like shaking with water, like, please don't throw up right now, please don't throw up.
Wow.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're laughing about it now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, now I can
Wow.
laugh. In the moment, I was
Yeah, of course.
it's terrible. And so basically, fast forward 2 months, I started working with a functional practitioner, and I mentioned how I get really bad hangovers and just more than the average person. And that was the other thing too, and that's how you knew it was kind of, I was using it to numb way too much because there's just so much to question when it comes to drinking and that whole party lifestyle, because I felt so sick anytime I drank. I could have one drink and my whole next day was ruined, but that wasn't enough to stop me from drinking for as many years as I did, as heavily and excessively as I did. So anyways, so I go to the functional practitioner, and he goes, your liver, I don't think is detoxing it properly. Let's do some cleanses. I need you to cut out alcohol entirely for the next 6 weeks or so. And I just remember feeling relief of somebody gave me permission not to drink and just excitement about that. And then it started to make me question, I'm like, why do I need somebody else to give me permission to not drink right now? But I was so excited about it and I felt so good about it. And I remember that was like the best feelings. I felt so good during those 6 weeks that I was like, I don't know if I want to go back. And so 6 weeks later, however long it went, he told me it was like I can incorporate it back in, and I told him I don't want to, and I haven't.
Ever since.
Yeah, I literally haven't had anything since. No, I've maybe had a sip of wine, and even that I was like, no.
Yeah, yeah. Was it just really because of the desire of how you felt that you were just like, I'm over this?
It was realizing how much better I felt without it, and just the anxiety that would come after even a drink, just the way my body felt the next day. It's just something I didn't miss and never really wanted to risk experiencing again.
Yeah.
And two, it was also just how much more in tune with myself I feel and without drinking. And then three, realizing how much I was using it in an unhealthy way to numb, or to be more social, or to be more goofy, or if I have 2 drinks, then people can see how goofy I really am. And so it's taught me a lot about stepping into that more authentic version of myself.
Yes.
Without having to rely on an external substance.
Yeah.
And same goes for smoking. Like the amount of times I'd be like, hey, let's pack a bowl and then we can go laugh and watch a movie. I'm like started questioning that of why am I relying on something external. And even with smoking, like I solely relied on that heavily in high school because it helped with the anxiety. But it was another thing that was just numbing, because if I wasn't high, here's the panic attacks.
Yeah.
So it just
the
became
Which is so scary to think about, because I mean, alcohol, obviously one of the worst addictions. We were just watching a movie where Lauren for the first time learned that an alcoholic coming off of alcohol, withdrawing from alcohol, is worse than somebody withdrawing from heroin. So it's like it's the worst neurotoxin out there. It creates such an addiction to the body, and it's everywhere. And now you have marijuana, which creates this false sense of self that is now openly being given to anybody who has a medical card. And if I have a headache, I can get a medical card. So it's
Which
like,
is crazy because we don't even know the long-term side effects of marijuana itself. And I believe that it's there for medicinal purposes. Is that the correct word? Like if you need
medicinal.
it,
Could be
like,
medicinal.
for something, like I get it, like a cancer treatment or whatever it may be. I'm sure there's uses for it, just like we have all their medication out there too. But for the long-term effects,
Sure.
like maybe you can't get addicted to it like physically, but you can build up the habitual habit that can get you addicted. And
Without.
I remember
Psychologically.
listening to a study of just like babies are being born with such a high percentage of, I think it's either THC or just marijuana in general in the baby. And it's just a wild place that we're currently in as a society.
Yeah. So let's bring it into holistic, because obviously now you've shifted from anything external no longer being the support in which you lean on to help you feel better. Now it's all internal. And I'm really curious, because a lot of your listeners, so specific, I would imagine a lot of moms or moms to be. If I'm a mom and I'm listening to this conversation, or I'm thinking about being a mom, and even as a dad to be, like, what would you recommend for a parent that maybe their children or their son or daughter is maybe experiencing some sort of anxiety?
Number one is just recognizing how much lifestyle really does play a role. So, and even thinking back, and I don't fault my parents for this at all. It's been such an up and coming awareness and topic, and think back to how grocery stores were when we were all growing up. It's like it was normal to have a Yoo-hoo and a Red 40 for lunch. It was just that's just kind of what was normal, and it wasn't.
Give me those lunchbox things.
Oh, the Lunchables.
The pizza sticks.
And I think just really, really recognizing that it's not a diet, it's literally a lifestyle to genuinely feel your best and heal your body from the inside out. And I think the second is, because you mentioned what if your child was struggling with mental health. So and I think just, and again, no fault to my parents whatsoever, because again, you don't know, and especially if you don't. I'm their oldest, I'm their first kid, so it's like you're just trying to do the best you can. Trying everything else first. I think there's such a literally functional medicine is the best thing to happen, and to just is so healing, beneficial. But a lot of times there is a deeper root cause to what's going on. So just not being quick to put a Band-Aid on whatever might be going on, and making sure that also you keep the conversations going. And my parents were so good at that, of constantly just checking in. How are you feeling? Do you want to talk about it? I would always do this one thing where if I was feeling, I had these worry dolls. So if I was feeling really anxious, I had a little like box or bag of my worry dolls. So if I was feeling worried, I would take one out, and I don't remember if I'd put it under my pillow or give it to my mom or something like that. Or I would just write down my worries are up, and I would give it to her. Because sometimes I wouldn't want to talk about it. But just like, it was hard to talk about it sometimes if I was feeling really anxious or a panic attack was coming on. So sometimes just voicing it and expressing, I'm feeling really anxious right now.
Yeah.
Or just like, help me.
Yeah.
And then just like literally just voicing that. And I was having this conversation with a friend recently as well. Of just sometimes the best thing you can do is just not feel like you're internalizing everything. And kids need to learn how to do that as well. And so I think from a really early age, if you see a kid struggling, it's really important to get them, feeling safe to express and to talk about it. Nothing's wrong with them. It's, all the things that just make them realize like, okay, it's not just me that has to carry this weight.
Yeah, and I could only imagine too, because the first time I read The Untethered Soul when I was, I want to say 19 years old. No, not even 18. And I remember that was the first time ever where I realized that like, I have an inner roommate, and that's my thoughts, and that I am completely separate from my thoughts. And I was 18 years old, so I can only imagine like children who are going through the experiences of life, beginning to have anxiety and not realize like that they're not their thoughts.
One of I love this. One of the first things my therapist taught me when I was 9 years old, she goes, let's name your anxiety. And what she was trying to get at is anxiety is not you. Like you are not your thoughts. Those worries, it's just a little buddy only trying to keep you safe. Right now, he thinks you're in threat, so he's there with you, he's showing up. So I named my anxiety Oscar. And
What if Oscar?
well, Oscar the Grouch, Sesame Street. Like, he was a mean character. I'm 9 years old.
Good.
And yeah, that was essentially just her saying, it's not you. Like, you don't have to take on all of this. Like, it's okay for feeling worried or, so my parents would then come along too. Oh, is Oscar here? And like, oh yeah, Oscar's really like, I'm in the back seat right now. Oscar's here driving the car. So,
Wow.
yeah.
What a huge distinction that you were able to make.
Yeah, 9 years old. I love, her name is Janet. Yeah, the therapist. She was good. She was good, yeah.
Did you have a name for when Oscar was not around, or was that just
Courtney?
No, it's just me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, so beautiful, and again, back to the question of a parent going through something similar. So much compassion for parents. I'm not a parent yet, so I don't know what it's like, but even in the world of today where social media and all of these different stimulus that's out there, kids now have literally the world at the fingertips. Like, they can look at anything, and in fact these apps are trying to get them to see everything. So much compassion for them. And for what you're pointing to, it's like, create a safe space, and you're not alone. There's people out there that could support you in supporting your child. You don't have to go for the easy thing that could quickly subdue the symptom, because you have an example like what you're sharing for yourself. I mean, you're a testament to this. What, 20 years of going through treatment before you actually, or
15 years, yeah.
15?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, where you're currently at, like, I know you've obviously built. I know you a little bit more,
Yeah,
but to share for those who don't know, you've recently created this new course.
Yes.
Right. So can you give a little breakdown on what that's like?
Yeah, so it's called Breaking Free. It's a 10-week holistic approach to healing anxiety, focusing on your habits, your nutrition, and rewiring your brain and your thoughts. So
It's pretty much everything that we just talked about.
literally, it is every single tool that I learned on this whole journey that took me 15 plus years to learn. I'll actually say took me close to 20 years to learn, because some of these tools that I put in this course are tools that I've learned in the past year of regulating my nervous system, of getting my body out of fight or flight, of learning how to feel safe again in my body. And it's literally taking everything that I wish someone had sat me down at 9 years old, and if someone gave me this rule book of like, here's what we need to do to get you off the medication and to get you feeling safe again in your body and to heal this anxiety, here's what I would do. And if someone gave this to me, so basically I was in the 9-year-old version of me's body creating this course, or in her mind.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what do I wish that I knew way back when? And what do I feel like it took me way too long to learn? And how can I give this to as many people as possible so they don't have to wait 15 years plus to find the answers, to find the results?
Ooh. Okay, so there is so good.
So excited about it.
So right there, with what you just shared,
Yeah.
so here's Oscar now, and we're going back now. Oscar is in the driver's seat. What is one thing you would tell Oscar?
Get out.
Abort mission.
Leave. No. I put this analogy in my course actually because I have a whole section on, like I mentioned, on breaking free from the anxiety identity. So one thing I have my clients, doesn't matter if they're 75 years old, I want you to name your anxiety and to really separate yourself from it. And I really, really emphasize you are not your anxious thoughts. So I think there's also a level of acceptance instead of trying to resist, because what we resist literally just persists. So recognizing that Oscar may be in the car with you, maybe he's chilling in the back seat, maybe he's in the passenger, maybe he's like screaming really loud at where to go, what direction to go, but you are still driving the car. And it's okay if he's there, acknowledge his presence, acknowledge he's there with you right now, but you are still in control, as loud and as annoying as and obnoxious as he may be.
That's a good tip.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that acknowledgement, not trying to resist it.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so how long is this course?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
Yeah. So you get one module released to you each week, and you have lifetime access to it. So if you need to take 4 months to go through it, if you need to revisit it 20 different times, you can. Yeah.
I'm excited just to continue to learn more about it. I mean, I've seen your journey, especially when you stopped the drinking and even just being closer here with you now that you moved in this area. It's been amazing just to see your journey through it.
Yeah.
As like, I feel like we're never technically there.
No.
Right?
No.
Like it's always going to be a journey, but the progress that you've even made in these past, like, has it been a year since you lived here?
I moved a year and a week ago.
Oh,
I've been here for 373 days or something. Who's counting? But yeah.
Well, during these 370 days, I've definitely just seen your level of commitment and desire
Thank you.
to really support not only yourself, but the people around you. And it
Thank
shows.
you.
Yeah, and I'm inspired by you, Court.
Thank you
It
guys.
certainly shows. I remember when we were
Yeah.
talking about flights, and we had just come back from our friend's wedding, and you were like, "No, I didn't feel that."
Yeah.
That was such a win.
And that's another thing too. As much as I've healed the anxiety is also a human emotion that
Yeah,
every
true.
single person feels. So to expect a life of no anxiety is to expect to be freaking Superman. Like it's not. It's just not. You're not going to set realistic expectations for yourself. So, and I'll share openly about struggles with anxiety sometimes still, and I've had resistance towards that, and that's something I've had to work through on my end because I had this narrative and this expectation of myself of, well, I'm a health coach, I help people heal anxiety, I can't show that I have anxiety still, or I can't show, not that I can't show that I experience the anxiety. But even just last year, 2 years ago actually, I started getting really bad panic attacks on flights. And that's something that was new for me. I was always able to fly with ease, and I started having to rely on Xanax again for flights, and it was something I had to work through. So it just goes to show you're human, and you're gonna have things that come up. And I'm grateful that I've worked through it, and I no longer have to rely on the Xanax, and I now enjoy flights again.
Yeah.
But it is something that you continue to grow, you continue to learn, you continue to just
What a
keep
beautiful part
evolving.
of life, right?
Yeah.
I heard someone say, like, life is meant to have those ups and downs.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't, it'd be a flat line.
Yeah.
And when you're at a flat line, you're dead.
It'd be boring.
Yeah.
Or dead,
Boring.
yeah.
Boring or dead.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
sign up for it.
No,
You know?
no.
And that's also a good takeaway for myself, because it's a good reminder. Like even in our relationship, we have a beautiful relationship, but the tools are always being used. It's like if the knife isn't used, it's gonna go dull.
Yeah.
So you gotta sharpen the tool.
And you also wouldn't, you're like,
Will it? I don't know.
you also wouldn't experience, like you wouldn't even know what highs would feel like if you didn't go through those lows. Like you would just be like, yeah, exactly what you said, life would just feel boring or non-existent.
Yeah. So where can people follow you? How can they get access to this course?
So Instagram is @CourtHayes_. TikTok is CourtHayes4, and both very active on those. And then my website with all the details on the course is courthayes.com.
Cool. And we're gonna
We'll
link
plug
everything
Yeah,
We'll plug
as
everything.
well,
Yeah.
so you guys can have easy access to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And definitely explore it. And regardless, like even if you move forward with the course or not, definitely give Courtney a follow because she puts out such incredible content.
thank
She's
you.
my inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
Totally. Is there anything that you're excited for yourself looking forward?
28
Yeah.
is just going to be such a year.
Beautiful.
So this course being launched, the official launch date is, pre-sale was today, official launch is tomorrow, November 1st. So I can feel that in my core. That's going to be huge. And just, I don't know, 27 was a lot of healing and a lot of figuring myself out and new avenues. And I just feel like 28 is the year for a lot of things to come to fruition.
Ah, beautiful.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Forward.
Yes, sister. Let's go.
Yes.
So awesome. So good.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be here with us,
Thank
Courtney.
you guys so much for having me. This is so fun.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to stay updated on future episodes. And we would love to know how you enjoyed today's episode by leaving us a review. We look forward to continuing this journey of self-discovery and connection with you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Much love.